Record. Yay, thanks. Okay, so what even is restorative justice, right? So right now, restorative justice is like a very pop phrase. It's very pertinent in the world. We've heard it a lot. I'm sure if you're on this call, like you've heard it at least once or twice around. So what is it? A response? Is it a process? Is it a philosophy? What the heck is it? So I would say yes, 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 and yes. It's all of those things. And we're going to talk about exactly how it is those things. So let's go on to the next slide. So RJ, restorative justice definition. So there are multiple. There's lots of restorative justice definitions out there. This is one that I happen to like a lot because of what it emphasizes. But yeah, there are a lot of people calling a lot of things RJ that might not necessarily be true in its entirety, but it has aspects of restorative justice. But I happen to like this particular definition. Does somebody want to come off mute and read it for us? That would be great. Anybody? No pressure.
I'll do it.
Cool.
Restorative justice is a philosophy and set of practices rooted in Indigenous teachings that emphasize our interconnection by repairing relationships when harm occurs, while proactively building and maintaining relationships to prevent future harm. David Ryan Barcega Castro Harris, founder, Amplify RJ.
Yeah, so thank you so much for reading that. I think it was crisp, I couldn't tell. Yeah, so Amplify RJ is an organization that I pay a lot of attention to when it comes to restorative justice matters. There, David Barcega Castro Harris is the founder, and just a lot of really great wisdom coming out of that organization. So one of the reasons I really like this definition is because it really talks about the interconnection of the relationship between folks, but also it talks about proactively building and maintaining the relationship from future harm, which I think sometimes gets missed in other definitions or other folks' frame of work. So it's not just cleaning up after the fact of a mess happening, but it's proactively preparing for times before things get messy. So I like this definition. Let's hit that next slide, please. So this is an image painted by Leah Marie Dorian, who's an Indigenous artist from the Saskatchewan, Canada. And it's a really beautiful image. It's very complex. It's a group of women who are in circle practice. And, there's a lot of nature happening, the flowers, the turtles, the sun, the birds, a lot of complexity going on. And then also you'll notice at the top, there's 3 medicine wheels, which is a symbol of Indigenous plains in Indigenous folks in Northern America. And really what that symbol represents is balance. And so some folks say that there's a correlation between the restorative practices and the restorative process and how the medicine wheel goes. So the red stands for intellectual space, the green stands for emotional, the white stands for spiritual, and the yellow stands for physical. And if you're looking to live a balanced life and move in a balanced way, then it's important to be tending to all of these different areas according to the philosophies of the Indigenous folks in the Plains area. So the correlation being for the restorative process is that the spirituals, like in that moment, you're setting the tone of the conversation, and the emotional, you're hearing the story. The physical, you're digging deeper and getting, more relational. And the intellectual is that next part of like, so what are we going to do about it? So what are the next moves? So I have a story. One of the so the Department of Justice has set a lot of different departments within itself, and one of them is, oftentimes trying to reach out to the indigenous people. And there was a story that happened in about, I want to say the late 80s, mid 80s, and the Department of Justice is reaching out to these indigenous folks, and they're gathering the elders and they're gathering leaders from all these different tribes. And they go and they make the speech, and they're like, hey, we have this really great program, and we think you will like it a lot, and you should be super proud because it's from you, it's from your peoples, and it's called Restorative Justice. And so one of the elders at the time gets up, and he's noticeably angry and upset, and he goes, I feel like you stole our watch, and now you're telling us what time it is. And so I'm not saying this story to deter non-Indigenous people from participating in restorative practices or anything, but I think it's really important, that we recognize the origins of the process and the practice, and then also respect that. And also just to illustrate that there's so much richness in where we're getting what we know today from back in hundreds and thousands of years ago, from indigenous folks, not just in the plains, not just in the Americas, but all over the world, and in Africa and other places as well. So yeah, let's hit that next slide. Okay, so we're getting closer to where we are today. So in the 80s and 90s, most of us were around, and we saw these really heavy, tough on crime bills that were out there. And so it wasn't just one or two things, like they got this whole battery of policies and laws together. So we have mandatory minimum sentencing, we have the 3 strikes laws, we have truth in sentencing laws, the war on drugs, harsh punishment for nonviolent crimes, problematic probation and parole, lack of mental health services, longer sentences and more life sentences. And then at the end, and exorbitant bails, which is just bonkers. So you're just sitting in jail waiting because you can't pay your $50 fine, and then you just get stuck endlessly waiting. And then to boot, we have these private prisons and profit motive. So this private prisons and profit motive is like the devil that perpetuates the need for it just kind of lifts up all these other things. And really what we have to blame for that is like these racist policies and these racist laws and racist policing. But really there's the crime rates were not equal to what was happening at the time. In the last 50 years, the prison population went up 500% because of this. So really it wasn't the crime rates weren't reflective of this. It was the racist like policies and the laws and the racist policing that was happening. And obviously that was hitting the communities of color far more starkly than it was any of the other communities. So, you know, if you're looking at drug use, right? So there's similar rates of drug use across different races, across different ethnicities, and people of color make up nearly 60% of people incarcerated for drug offenses. So the effects of this discrimination was devastating to the communities of color, minority communities, and it separated families, and it led to generational incarceration. So simultaneously, we're looking at, so this is going on in the adult world, and in the younger people's lives in schools, they're having similar punishments, and they're having similar responses. So they're tough on crime, tough on everything in the school systems. The suspension and expulsion rates were astronomical. The Black boys were getting suspended 3 times as much as white boys, and Black girls were getting suspended 6 times as much as white girls. And so that led to the school to prison pipeline, which still exists. And that also led to generational incarceration. So like all of that to say is there's this huge lead up to where we are now with restorative practices and why we are here. So if we go to the next slide really quickly. So we're going to watch actually a video, 2-minute video from Palante, which is a youth-led transformative justice program that's happening in Holyoke High School, Massachusetts. And they're going to just shed a little bit more light on what is going on with this.